The fall of Earth. The day the sky burned, humanity learned what it meant to be small. They came without warning, without diplomacy, without mercy. The Veydrath Empire had ruled the stars for 10,000 years, and to them, Earth was nothing more than another insignificant world to be added to their collection. Their ships appeared in orbit in numbers that defied comprehension. Gleaming black vessels, each the size of a mountain, drifting like predators above our blue world. They filled the skies until the sun itself seemed swallowed, casting shadows over nations that had never known true unity until that moment of terror. And when their voices reached us, amplified through every hijacked broadcast, their judgment was swift. You are primitives, unfit for the stars. Your world will burn, your people will serve, and your history will end here. The invasion began with fire, the breaking of defenses. Every defense we had, the fleets we thought powerful, the weapons we thought advanced, shattered like glass against their onslaught. Nuclear missiles, railguns, drones, all the pride of human warfare, meant nothing to an empire that had already crushed 1,000 worlds before ours. The first orbital strike burned the Pacific Fleet to cinders before a single shot could be fired in return. In Moscow, laser fire from orbit vaporized entire divisions before they could even mobilize. In New York, towers crumbled as orbital bombardment turned concrete and steel into dust. Within days, oceans boiled where their plasma weapons struck. Forests ignited across continents. Cities, Paris, Beijing, Cairo, Sao Paulo, each fell in a cascade of firestorms. Humanity, once master of its own fragile sphere, found itself crawling in the dirt, unable to strike back an enemy that treated us as less than insects, the harvest of survivors. But destruction was only the beginning. The Veydrath were not conquerors who left corpses in their wake. They were harvesters. Their ships descended, dark leviathans blotting out the ruined skies. Survivors were rounded up, corralled into pens, and herded aboard transport carriers. Soldiers, civilians, children. It did not matter. To the Empire, we were spoils of war, fuel for their endless machine. Millions were shackled in chains of alien alloy, shipped across the galaxy to serve as slaves on worlds we could not name. Families were torn apart, languages reduced to screams, nations erased in silence. And all the while, the Veydrath mocked us. They laughed at our defiance. They mocked our weapons as toys. They called us animals, barely intelligent, barely worthy of survival. Primitives, they named us, and with that word they condemned us to nothingness. Earth itself was left in ruin. Oceans boiled where their weapons struck. The sky turned red with ash. Once great cities were reduced to graveyards of twisted steel. The cradle of humanity became a tomb, the birth of resistance. And yet, in the ashes, something stirred. It began not with generals, but with survivors. Scattered soldiers who had escaped capture. Engineers who salvaged what little remained. Farmers who had lost everything but the will to endure. In bunkers deep beneath shattered mountains, in ruined subway tunnels beneath fallen cities, in hidden caves where the Empire's sensors could not see, they gathered. They had no fleets, no armies, no hope, but they had rage. They had memory, and they had something the Empire could never understand, imagination. Where the Veydrath saw ruins, we saw resources. Where they saw broken weapons, we saw parts. Where they saw a crushed species, we saw a spark waiting to ignite. An oath was spoken in those dark places, whispered from survivor to survivor, carried across continents and into the void by the last transmissions of a dying Earth. If the stars will not have us, we will take them. The enemy's blindness. The Veydrath did not notice. To them, Earth was finished. Another conquest. Another primitive race shackled. They saw no danger in leaving scraps of survivors behind. What threat could a broken species pose? What vengeance could slaves whisper in the dark? They did not see the fire they had lit. In their arrogance, they believed humanity's story had ended. They thought we would bow as countless others had bowed before. But where others bent, humanity broke. And in breaking, we became something new. The spark. Among the survivors, engineers began to study scraps of alien technology smuggled from battlefields. Mechanics took apart fallen drones, reverse engineering their cores with nothing more than makeshift tools and desperation. Soldiers trained in the ruins, teaching resistance fighters how to kill an Empire soldier with stolen rifles and sharpened steel. And even the powerless, farmers' children, the broken, swore their part in the struggle to come. If the Veydrath had taught us anything, it was that no one was too small to fight. Across the ash of our world, in the hearts of those who refuse to kneel, humanity's first resistance was born. The fall and the rise. The fall of Earth was not just the destruction of a planet. It was the birth of a war. Humanity had lost everything. Our cities, our armies, our home. But in losing everything, we had been given one terrible gift: freedom from fear. There was nothing more the Empire could take from us. And so we became dangerous. For in the ashes of Earth, humanity was reborn, not as primitives, not as slaves, but as a spark of fire that would spread across the stars. The Empire thought they had ended us, but they had only begun our story. And one day, they would learn what it meant to call humanity primitive, shadows of resistance. The Empire thought the fall of Earth was the end. But endings have a way of becoming beginnings. Scattered across the galaxy, humanity did not vanish. We adapted, we learned, we changed, and in the places the Veydrath least expected, in the shadows between stars and forgotten ruins of conquered worlds, we began to resist, the scattered survivors. When the transports took millions of humans from Earth, they believed they had broken us. Some were sent to mining colonies where prisoners labored until their hands bled and their lungs blackened. Others were scattered to agricultural worlds, forced to till alien soil under the whips of overseers. But chains do not erase memory. Shackles do not extinguish rage. Among the enslaved were soldiers who remembered battles, engineers who remembered machines, hackers who remembered systems, and farmers who remembered how to endure hardship. These fragments of humanity, scattered across the stars, carried one thing the Empire could never strip away: hope. And hope became dangerous when it turned into action. The first sparks of rebellion. It began with whispers. A guard dead in a mining tunnel, his weapon stolen. A supply shipment that never reached its destination. A transport ship vanishing into the void. The Veydrath dismissed it as coincidence, as petty crime. But the truth was spreading. Humans were fighting back. On the mining world of Theron 6, slaves sabotaged the drills, causing collapse that swallowed half the facility. On the agricultural planet Kari's Prime, humans poisoned the overseer's water supply, wiping out an entire garrison. And on the remote frontier outpost of Vila's Station, a handful of human technicians hacked into the station systems, seizing control long enough to launch themselves into freedom aboard stolen shuttles. Each act was small, insignificant against the weight of the Empire, yet together they were sparks. Sparks that spread, sparks that promised fire. The birth of the shadow fleets. Those who escaped slavery carried more than wounds. They carried knowledge. Engineers and mechanics began salvaging what they could from the wreckage of battlefields and abandoned stations. Old freighters, stripped of cargo, were refitted with hidden cannons. Mining ships, designed to crack asteroids, were reinforced with armor plating and converted into crude but deadly gunships. Even shuttlecraft, fragile and small, were modified to carry explosives for suicidal charges. The Veydrath laughed when they first heard of human fleets. To them, it was pathetic, junk vessels piloted by primitives, toys against titans. But humanity had always thrived in making the most of scraps. Where the Empire built perfection, humans built improvisation. Where the Empire relied on overwhelming power, humans relied on cunning. And so, from the bones of forgotten ships, the shadow fleets were born. The first raids. The raids began cautiously. A lone convoy ambushed in an asteroid belt. A patrol ship lured into a collapsing star's gravity well. A supply depot in the outer colonies obliterated by bombs hidden inside its own cargo containers. The Empire dismissed it as piracy. They did not see the pattern forming. They did not realize that every raid taught humanity more about their technology, their tactics, their weaknesses. One raid became 2. 2 became 10. 100. Each more daring, more precise, more devastating. By the time the Veydrath recognized the truth, it was too late. Humanity had learned how to fight them, the weapon of fear. The Empire had ruled for millennia through one weapon stronger than any fleet: fear. Fear kept their slaves silent. Fear kept their worlds obedient. Fear kept their enemies broken before the first shot was ever fired. But humanity began to turn that weapon against them. Veydrath patrols no longer traveled confidently through the void. They traveled in terror, never knowing when or where the shadows would strike. Supply routes bled resources. Communication lines were cut. Garrisons once unshakable whispered of ghosts in the dark. Ghosts that struck without warning, that killed without mercy, and that vanished without a trace. And those whispers spread faster than any fleet could stop. Across enslaved worlds, rumors ignited. The primitives from Earth were fighting back. The primitives were winning. For the first time in centuries, the Empire's subjects began to wonder. If even humans could resist, what excuse did they have to kneel? The making of legends. From the chaos, leaders began to rise. Not kings or emperors, but survivors. Captain Mara Lorne, once a freighter pilot, became infamous for ambushing Empire warships in asteroid belts, using mines cobbled together from stolen fuel cells. Joran Hale, a former miner, commanded a fleet of refitted drilling ships that gutted enemy carriers from within. Celine Ward, a hacker once enslaved on Kari's Prime, earned the name the Ghost of Veydrath after she seized control of an entire orbital defense grid and turned it against its masters. They were not born heroes. They were born desperate. But desperation, when sharpened into defiance, created legends, and legends became hope. The Empire's first wounds. The Veydrath did not ignore humanity forever. When raids turned into campaigns, when whispers turned into revolts, the Empire unleashed its fleets. Massive armadas swept through the stars, hunting the resistance with overwhelming force. Yet even here, humanity adapted. We did not face them head-on. We did not play their game. We made our own rules. We struck and vanished. We ambushed and retreated. We turned asteroid fields into minefields, nebulae into traps, derelict stations into bombs. Every time the Empire thought they had crushed us, we slipped through their grasp, leaving only wreckage and fire in our wake. And slowly, painfully, the unthinkable began to happen. The Empire bled. The cracks in the throne. Across the galaxy, species long enslaved began to watch. The Karate, chained for 500 years, rose in revolt on 3 worlds. The Selari, their fleets dismantled centuries ago, seized abandoned shipyards and rebuilt. The Javel, thought broken beyond repair, slaughtered their overseers and joined the shadows. They had seen countless rebellions rise and fall, crushed before they began. But humanity was different. Humanity refused to die. Humanity fought with fire and fury, with cunning and chaos. Humanity did not kneel, and in watching us, they remembered their own strength. The dawn before the war. The Veydrath still believed themselves unshakable. They still believed their empire eternal. To them, the resistance was an annoyance, a nuisance, something to be eradicated once the Emperor's fleets finished their cleansing. But in the shadows of their arrogance, a storm was gathering. Humanity, once broken and enslaved, now wielded fleets of fire. Species once silent, now whispered of rebellion. The galaxy, long asleep under the boot of tyranny, stirred with new dreams. The Empire had laughed when they called us primitive. They had mocked us as unworthy of the stars. But soon they would learn the truth. In the shadows, we were becoming something far more dangerous than primitives. We were becoming predators. The hunt turns. The Empire had grown arrogant on its throne of ash. For 10,000 years, the Veydrath had crushed rebellion after rebellion, each crushed beneath the weight of their endless fleets. No uprising had ever lasted more than a season. No slave race had ever risen beyond their chains. Their empire endured because it was ruthless, efficient, inevitable. But humanity was not inevitable. Humanity was unpredictable. And when their fleets came for us, when they tried to grind us into dust, they discovered something they had never faced before, an enemy that refused to fight by their rules. The Empire strikes back. The Veydrath response to our growing raids was overwhelming. Entire battle groups were deployed to the outer colonies. Dreadnoughts the size of continents descended into rebel sectors. Fleets of black armored soldiers swept across worlds, leaving cities burning as examples of imperial justice. The Emperor declared a single command: find the humans, erase them, make their name nothing but ash in history. And so the galaxy watched as the full wrath of the Empire descended upon us. But where they expected a simple extermination, they found a war unlike any they had fought before. The rules of survival. Humanity did not face them head-on. We couldn't. A single dreadnought could tear through an entire flotilla of our scrap ships. Their armies numbered in the millions, their fleets in the tens of thousands. Meeting them in open battle was suicide, so we rewrote the rules. We struck from shadows. We vanished into storms. We turned the void itself into a weapon. In the asteroid belt of Doras, we planted charges in rock and detonated them as an Empire fleet passed through, shredding their cruisers in a storm of debris. At the twin suns of Parthes, we lured destroyers into the unstable gravity of a dying star, watching as their engines failed and their hulls were torn apart in fire. In the Veiled Nebula, our fleets disappeared into the mist, sensors blinded, only to emerge like phantoms behind their lines, gutting their convoys and slipping away once more. The Empire called us cowards, but cowards do not bleed empires. Hunters do, and we had become hunters. The rise of the predators. Every battle, every ambush, every desperate victory taught us something new. We learned how to hack their targeting systems, turning their guns against their own ships. We learned how to overload their power cores with nothing more than stolen mining lasers and explosive fuel cells. We learned how to cripple dreadnoughts by targeting the weak points in their shield harmonics, things the Empire had never needed to hide, because no other race had ever been clever enough to notice. Our captains became predators, each with their own methods of turning weakness into strength. Mara Lorne, the Phantom of Doras, used false distress signals to lure fleets into ambushes. Joran Hale, the Breaker, specialized in boarding actions. His miners turned soldiers tearing through Empire warships with plasma cutters. Celine Ward, the Ghost, hacked into navigation systems mid-battle, sending capital ships crashing into their own escorts. These were not generals bred for war. They were survivors forged in fire. And in their hands, humanity's fleets became a storm of chaos the Empire could not contain. The spreading fire. The Empire believed they were hunting us. But in truth, it was we who hunted them. Every fleet they sent became another opportunity. Every patrol was another ambush. Every convoy another feast. Their strength, meant to crush us, only gave us more targets. And as their losses mounted, something began to change across the galaxy. The Cellari, who had been enslaved for centuries, saw human victories and rose in defiance, seizing weapons depots and slaughtering overseers. The Javel, once thought broken beyond all hope, sabotaged their masters' fleets and sent them crashing into the void. The Karate, chained for generations, joined the Shadow fleets with stolen ships of their own. The galaxy had lived in fear of the Empire for so long it had forgotten what defiance felt like. Humanity reminded them. And with every act of defiance, the cracks in the Empire's throne widened. The cost of defiance. But rebellion is never free. For every victory, there was blood. For every ambush, a counterstrike. For every Empire ship destroyed, dozens of human lives were lost. Entire colonies were burned as retribution. On Arios 9, 100,000 slaves were executed when their overseers discovered a human raid had passed nearby. On Vila Station, the Ghost herself barely escaped as the Empire unleashed a dreadnought bombardment, killing 500,000 innocents in an attempt to kill a single woman. We counted our dead in the millions. Friends, families, children. The Empire made sure every act of defiance came at a cost we could barely endure. And yet we endured because we had no choice. We were a species with nothing left to lose. And there is nothing more dangerous in the galaxy than a people with nothing left to lose. The Empire begins to fear. The turning point came not in a grand battle, but in whispers. For the first time in recorded history, the Veydrath hesitated. Fleets that once traveled the void unchallenged began traveling in convoys, terrified of ambush. Commanders, once arrogant, began to request reinforcements before daring to enter human sectors. The hunters had become the hunted, and worse for the Empire, their fear was contagious. Their slaves saw it. Their conquered subjects saw it. The galaxies saw it. For millennia, the Empire had ruled to the illusion of invincibility. Humanity shattered that illusion, piece by piece, ship by ship, raid by raid. And when the illusion cracked, so too did the Empire's control. The legend spread. Stories of human defiance spread faster than truth. Entire species spoke of humans as shadows of vengeance, spirits of fire that struck from the void. Some claimed we could vanish at will, others that we could turn any machine against its masters. The myths grew, and with them, our power. It didn't matter if the stories were true. The galaxy believed them. And belief is its own kind of weapon. The turning of the hunt. The Empire's grand fleets had come to erase us. Instead, they found themselves bleeding, faltering, and retreating. They had laughed when they called us primitive. Now, they whispered of us as predators. The galaxy began to ask questions no empire could forward. If humanity, weak, broken, enslaved, could rise against the might of the Veydrath, what excuse did anyone else have to remain in chains? And so the hunt turned. No longer were we the prey. No longer were we the quarry. We were the predators in the dark. And soon, the Empire would learn what it truly meant to be hunted, shattering the Empire. The Empire had bled, but it had not yet fallen. The Veydrath still held more fleets than any other power in the galaxy. Their armies still marched across 1,000 worlds. Their thrones still stood, shining with the arrogance of 10,000 years. But beneath that shine, cracks had become fractures. And into those fractures, humanity drove the blade, the fire of rebellion. Across the galaxy, rebellion blazed. The Cellari launched uprisings on 6 worlds, armed with stolen human weapons. The Javel seized shipyards, resurrecting fleets thought long extinct. The Karate broke their chains and marched with human warbands, their battle cries shaking the stars. For every world that burned under the Empire's vengeance, 2 more rose against it. For every rebellion crushed, 3 more ignited. The Empire was drowning in the very fear it had once commanded. And at the heart of the storm, humanity stood, not as slaves, not as prey, but as leaders of the fire, the coalition of the broken. The shadow fleets grew, not only with human ships, but with alien allies. Cellari engineers brought forgotten technologies. Javel tacticians taught strategies from wars older than Earth itself. Karate warriors joined boarding crews, turning raids into massacres. Even smaller races, long dismissed as weak, lent their hands to the cause, eager to carve their share of vengeance. What had begun as scattered survivors of a ruined world had become a coalition of the broken, species united not by empire, not by conquest, but by defiance. And at the head of this coalition, humanity carried a banner written not in words, but in fire. The Empire is not eternal. The Empire can fall. The plan for the throne world. But rebellions, however fierce, cannot win wars alone. The Veydrath would never collapse from 1,000 cuts. Their fleets, though weakened, still outnumbered ours 10 to 1. Their armies, though stretched thin, still crushed worlds with ease. To end them, we needed more than defiance. We needed to strike at the heart, the throne world, the seat of the emperor, the jewel of the empire, the fortress said to be unbreakable, shielded by armadas beyond number and defenses no fleet had ever pierced. It was madness to even consider. So, of course, we considered it, because humanity had survived the impossible. We had endured the end of our world. We had turned scrap into fleets, slaves into soldiers, shadows into fire. Impossible was simply another word for necessary. The march to the heart. The coalition gathered in silence. Fleets of stolen ships, ragged but deadly. Squadrons of alien warcraft, resurrected from rust. Human-engineered monstrosities cobbled together from wreckage. Weapons bristling from hulls that should never have flown. We did not march as conquerors. We marched as executioners. Through burning sectors we advanced. Every battle a hammer striking the already fractured empire. At Zalor's gate, We broke an entire blockade with mines hidden inside refugee transports. At the Vale of Rin, Selene Ward hacked the defense grid system, turning it against its masters. At the twin moons of Cories, Joran Hale led boarding crews that seized 3 dreadnoughts intact, adding them to our fleets. Each victory carried us closer to the heart. Each loss, though heavy, only sharpened our resolve. And then, at last, the throne world lay before us. The final battle. The throne world was everything the legends promised. A planet wrapped in fortress rings, its skies bristling with defenses, its orbit lined with fleets beyond counting. To assault it was madness. To win was unthinkable. But we did not come to think. We came to end. The battle began with silence, then with fire. Human fleets struck first, launching waves of improvised warheads, not to destroy but to blind. Explosions bloomed across the void, sensors overloaded, shields flickered. The Cellari fleets cut through the chaos with precision strikes, targeting command ships and communication relays. The Javel swarmed the flanks, dragging Empire fleets into traps laid with human cunning. And at the center, the Shadow fleets dove headlong into the storm, ragged ships against Titans, fearless because fear had died with Earth. The void burned. The sky shattered. Thousands of ships were lost, but thousands more pressed on. And then came the breach, the breaking of the unbreakable. For 10,000 years, the throne world defenses had never fallen, but the Empire had never faced humanity. Selene Ward seized a defense grid, forcing the planetary shield to collapse for mere minutes. But minutes were all we needed. Joran Hale and his boarding crews rammed stolen dreadnoughts into the fortress rings, cutting paths with plasma cutters and detonating charges from within. Mara Lorne led the final push, her fleet diving through the gap like predators through blood. And through that breach, humanity poured. We stormed the skies. We stormed the fortresses. We stormed the throne itself. The Empire's arrogance had made them blind. Their pride had made them slow. Their cruelty had made them weak. And in their weakness, we became strong. The Emperor kneels. At the heart of the burning throne world, in the shattered halls of his palace, the Emperor of the Veydrath stood defiant. He had called us animals. He had named us primitives. He had burned our world and enslaved our people. Now he stood surrounded by the very slaves he had scorned, his fleets burning in orbit, his armies broken, his throne crumbling beneath him. And at last, he did the one thing he swore he never would. He knelt, the message in ashes. When the fires died, when the battle was won, humanity left behind no crown, no ruler, no empire. We left only a message, carved into the ruins of the Emperor's palace, written in every language of the Coalition, etched for the galaxy to see, with the words that would echo across the stars for eternity. Never call us primitive again. The dawn of a new galaxy. The Empire was not instantly erased. Its remnants scattered, its loyalists fled, its warlords clung to scraps of power. But its core, its heart, its unshakable throne was gone, and in its place rose something new. A galaxy no longer bound by fear. A galaxy where slaves had become soldiers. A galaxy where the weakest had risen, and in rising, had shown that the strong could fall. Humanity did not rule that galaxy. We had no desire to replace one tyrant with another, but we had lit a fire that could not be extinguished. From the ashes of Earth to the ruins of the throne world, our story had carried one truth. We were never primitives. We were warriors, and the galaxy would never forget it.